Hi, I'm Joan Lawrence Bauer. I am one of the co-chairs of the Shandaken Hardenberg Communities Rising Committee, and I'd like to welcome everybody here today. I'd just like to introduce my other co-chairs who are here. Doris Nieves is another co-chair from Shandaken, and Sally Fairburn is a co-chair from Hardenberg, and the other Hardenberg co-chair is not here today. You'll be getting to see and hear all of our committee members throughout the presentation that we're about to do. So I'll let them introduce themselves as each one of them comes up to do a part of our presentation. I'm waiting for the slide change. So this meeting is the fourth in a series of major public outreach meetings. We've had many public meetings, but we'll talk more about those later on this program. And so before we go into what we've done, how we've done it, what we've thought about and decided and where we're headed, I'd like to introduce Lori DeBoer. Lori is here from the New York State Housing and Community Renewal. She is our storm recovery liaison. She has been with us through every agonizing step of this process and will be continuing not only through what we've done so far, but through the whole implementation of it. So Lori's going to explain a little bit about the program and the process, and then we'll go into what each of our communities is going to be looking to do.
Well, thank you, Jim. Thank you. Well, for anybody who's been to any of our meetings and for our committee members, we already know that the New York Rising Community Reconstruction Program is about providing assistance to communities that were severely impacted by whether it be Hurricane Irene, Tropical Storm Lee, or Superstorm Sandy. The genesis of this program came about after Superstorm Sandy, when the federal government appropriated quite a bit of money for storm recovery. When the governor went and submitted something known as an action plan saying, we want some of that money and this is how we're going to spend it, he had the forethought to say, well, you know what, communities in New York that were impacted by Irene and by Lee have still not completely recovered. There are unmet needs there. So the New York Rising Community Reconstruction Program is all about providing some resources to communities that are still struggling to recover from events that transpired now almost 3 years ago. And that's what this program has been about. Over the last 9 months, members from both Shandaken and Hardenberg have come together on a regular basis, I think pretty much weekly, to find ways to help both communities fully recover and do so in a manner that would make them more resilient to future storms. And we're not just talking infrastructure, we're talking how do we improve our local economies? How do we build resilience into anything that we do? How do we make sure that we maintain the quality of life that we enjoy in this region and protect our environment? The committees have been looking at all of these things across the board, and they've been doing a fabulous job of it. And so at the end of the day, we have a final plan that this committee has developed. And in that are a list of projects that some of which will be implemented with money that is already set aside for your community. In each of the towns, there is $3 million in community development block grant assistance available for them to implement some of their proposed projects. And we'll talk about how implementation looks towards the end of this presentation. Today is really all about hearing what the committee has done. They've done a fabulous job, so I'd rather let you listen to them. Before we do that, we will hear a little bit more about the process that they've engaged in, and I believe Cynthia is going to, Joan? Okay, Joan is going to tell us more about the process. Thank you, Joan.
All right, so it has been a long process. We have, as you can see, had many, many meetings. All of our meetings were open to the public, but we did 4 major meetings like this where we really tried to bring people out to do special outreach, to hear from as many people as we could possibly hear from, and to get a dialogue going. We had to do a conceptual plan. We did do a major inventory of all critical assets for each community. And when we were looking at our critical assets for each community, in some cases, our critical assets were not necessarily in our communities. For example, the town of Hardenburg noted the Margaretville Hospital as a critical asset, but it's not in their community. More public meetings. Incredible science went into this program. And this is something that's really important to understand. We didn't just sort of make it up or think about, oh, I think the last time this is what happened. We used hydraulic models, HEC-RAS modeling, many different formulas depending on the site and the project. So there was a lot of science involved. We also had risk assessments done. We had cost-benefit analysis done on every project. Prospective funding, where is the funding going to come from? Is it only going to come from the $3 million, or are there other funding sources out there that can help with it? We identified projects and submitted them. We've attended conferences in Albany, major conferences in Albany, with the governor there, and that brings us to this point today. So, we had at least 200 projects that were suggested for this program. Many of them came from the committee members. Many of them were near and dear to our hearts. That's why we were sitting on the committee hoping we could get our projects done and do things in our hamlets and areas. But with the qualitative analysis, what the community told us, and then what the science told us, we had to obviously narrow that down. So we narrowed it down into 24 featured projects and resiliency recommendations. And that's what we're here to tell you about today. Each community is getting $3 million, so it is a total of $6 million. And each of us was asked to come up with 10 projects that went into a proposed category, and you'll hear more later, and then some other projects beyond that. So that's what we did. These were the planning areas that we were talking about, Shandaken and Hardenburg. And these were some of the critical issues as opposed to projects that we were looking at. So limited communication, we all know that's a critical issue here. Our infrastructure, it's aging, it's all located right next to the streams. Undersized, many of our bridges and culverts are not as big as they needed to be. Our regional demographics, we're getting older, we have a lot of seasonal folks, and we have tremendous workforce challenges. Economic development is a critical issue, and our limited ability to develop around us was one of our really critical issues. In terms of the 4 major meetings that I was talking about, we had one that focused on explaining the community's rising program and getting input from everybody. And we actually had people voting at the end of the meeting on different areas that they thought would be important to address, whether it was economic development, whether it was infrastructure, whether it was vulnerable populations, things like that. Our second major meeting had another analysis overview of projects that had been proposed and suggested and bringing up new projects and more public voting. And then from that, we actually worked on some projects, did the cost-benefit analysis, the risk assessments, the modeling, and at meeting 3, we came up with a draft of proposed projects, which we presented and listened to comment about. And then meeting 4 is today, the review of our final plan. And I will, in case I forget, I will say it now. We did have the lists of proposed projects for each community out on the front table, and I hope you picked up a list. And then before you go, we do have an executive summary of the plans here that you can take with you when we go. Ultimately, the final plan, when it's printed by the state, will be available in the communities and on the websites. But this is the meat of it, and this is what we have today. So with that, I'd like to ask my co-chair, Doris Nieves, to come up and talk about what the community told us in the process.
Hello, my name is Doris and I'm a local resident. I live in Mount Tremper. I also have had a business for the last 30 years in design, architecture, and master planning. So I really wanted to be on this committee so I could see the process of working with the state and how we could get money to help our town. The process has been completely transparent. Everybody has been welcomed to every single meeting, and also we've adjusted how we've worked based on people who have attended our meetings. What the community told us in the first meeting that we handed out a survey, and subsequent meetings also. These are the things that they told us. They wanted us to repair the infrastructure. The stream management has always been a key issue. How we were going to continue recovery efforts, and how to improve our critical facilities. And that is an overall topic that keeps coming back, and we'll get to that a little later. And to enhance economic development, because we're in an area that really doesn't have a lot of new economic development. We want to keep the people who are living here, and we also want to attract new people. And to protect and enhance our natural and cultural resources. The reason that people come to the Catskills and Catskill Park is because it is beautiful, it is pristine. You don't get better nature than this. You know, you see eagles at the reservoir on Sundays. And to the other things that are really critical was to improve our local and regional connectivity. We're in an area that has very little connectivity. That means, you know, we don't have cell service, we don't have a lot of cell towers. All of those issues are being addressed. And improve our safety. That's always critical. We want to keep the people who are here as safe as possible. A lot of the projects that you will see have gone through this whole vetting process. Again, it's been through science, it's been through cost-benefit analysis. If you don't see your particular project at the top, it doesn't mean that it's dead in the water. It just means that these are priority projects for the moment, and at a later time, or as funds become available, or as we apply for grants, those projects can be addressed. Every project that came up was a legitimate and valid project. It's almost hard to say no to any of these projects. So there is no. Right now, this is where we are, this is what we're working towards. And that's it. So this is what's coming up. Who's doing the Mark? Where's Mark? There it is.
Okay, so what we're going to see are, I think I stand here, right? Everybody hear me? Yeah, what you're going to see are proposed projects, featured projects, and what is now being called resiliency recommendations. So as the previous slide pointed out, we had over 200 recommendations for projects we had to sort through. And we were asked to come up, for each community, Hardenberg, Shandaken, we were asked to come up with 10 priority projects that we felt were the most important to the guidelines of the program, fulfilling the guidelines of the program, and also doable. And there was a whole list of suggestions and requirements and recommendations. For example, these were projects that had to be completed within 2 years. A whole list of recommendations like that. So it came up with 10 proposed projects, which you saw on the slide. And the featured projects were, I'm not sure what the exact number of the featured projects, or it didn't have to be 10 projects, but we felt these were projects that were important to the community that needed to be addressed going forward, if not now, and that were projects that we felt were viable for future funding, possibly from other funding streams. And then the resiliency recommendations were formerly called aspirational projects. Projects that spoke to what the vision of what we wanted this community to be. So, for example, increased safety measures for the vulnerable population amongst us, older people, younger people, sick people, people who require meds in this kind of disaster. Cell service was one of those projects. So we think that to have a really viable economic environment here, we need universal cell service. So that's something that, for various reasons, won't be funded in this particular funding program, but we think are important to the community moving forward. So those are the three categories: the proposed projects, the featured projects, and the resiliency recommendations. And we'll be hearing more about those going forward.
So this map shows you where projects in Shandaken are. And the reason that we wanted to put this up was so that you could see that they're really sort of spread out throughout the town from one side to the other. The next slides actually talk about our projects. The proposed could conceivably be done, though there's more than $3 million worth, so clearly, even in the proposed section, not all of those projects will be done. And then we'll move to featured, and we will move to resiliency through other funding sources as those other sources become available. But these are the handouts that you have. So now I'm going to ask Aaron Bennett to come up and to talk a little bit about the projects themselves that are on your lists. And after Aaron, some of the other committee members will talk about other projects.
Thanks, Joan. Hi, Aaron Bennett. Been on the committee not since the beginning, but about halfway through, but represent Ulster County's Department of Environment, also a resident of the town of Shandaken. I'm talking about bridges today, because there are a lot of them in Shandaken, but by no means am I an expert on these. But I just want to give you a little bit of a sense of what these projects entail. By the way, these projects that you see on the list are in no particular order. They're not the first one, Muller Road, is not the most critical. And I also pulls through with the additional resiliency and the featured project. But so the first one, there's one Little Peck Hollow Road Bridge, and I'm just using my cheat sheet here, so I'm going to go in this order. So it's estimated to cost about $380,000. There are FEMA dollars from post-Irene also for this, and actually all these bridges have FEMA dollars that may be able to be matched, thus stretching the $3 million. At the end of this road, there's a Fish and Game Club, and it services two homes, and the idea there would be to upsize that culvert that's there now to a box culvert, and I just know from personal experience that it's failed like 4 times in the last 30 years, so it's a definitely undersized structure. The next one, the Lower Birch Creek Road Bridge. So that one, for those of you that go out Lower Birch Creek Road, you go up towards the state land. It's called Doc Reiser's estate, so it's a very popular access for recreation. So that bridge is currently, I think it's just a temporary bridge that's in there now. But the real, I don't know, just the best thing about this project is that it would reduce local flood elevation by about 2.5 feet. So from a 10-year flood event. So pretty significant impact to rectify, to correct the sizing on that bridge. And that's $375,000 or so for that. The Muller Road Bridge is a little road, a dead-end road that services 4 or 5 houses off of Fox Hollow Road. That one's about a $350,000 project, and again, the big time flood elevation reduction for a 25-year storm, it reduces flood elevations by about a little over 5 feet. So another good investment there. The Panther Kill Road Bridge, so that's Panther Kill Road is off of Woodland Valley Road. Again, there's FEMA dollars for this one. It's, again, a $350,000 or so project. And that one is another dead-end road. So when the bridge goes, you know what happens. People get stuck. That one, I don't know how many homes are up there, but there's also the Menlo Mountain Retreat and Conference Center up there. So again, another popular, important asset for town of Shandaken. Did I get them all? Is there one more? Oh, one more. And then Peck Hollow is off of Route 28. Again, there's a number of homes up there, but again, another dead-end road. That bridge, take about 5 months to replace, and about a $400,000 project. And and so basically the whole, we've all heard that. So improve stream flow, that's the main thing. Keep the bridge in place, alleviate localized flooding on the roadways, and hopefully they will all, allow conveyance of what used to be called the 100-year storm event, which is now referred to as the 1% annual chance flood event. And so these bridges, most in these towns, are designed for about a 50-year at most. So to upsize that, so we don't have to keep dumping dollars into the same structure. And Rob, I think you're up next to talk about the.
I'm Rob Stanley. I'm the Town of Shandaken Supervisor. Two projects I'm going to discuss are the Phoenicia Restoration and Recreation Trail Project. Basically, I know nobody's explained it yet, but through the modeling they keep referring to, we're doing a digital analysis of the flow rates of the stream throughout all the channels. When we do that, and to realize these differentiations that Aaron was talking about on the flood levels, saying it was a 5-foot reduction for flood levels or a 1-foot reduction for flood levels, we can do that through this modeling mechanism by removing bridges, realigning, widening the channels, and so on and so forth, and seeing what the effects are on those water depths. So in doing an analysis for Phoenicia, we recognize that the Bridge Street Bridge is what we call a pinch point, or it's creating a backwater into the hamlet of Phoenicia. So what we're discussing is a realignment of the Bridge Street Bridge, where we would elevate the bridge to allow for more flow under the bridge, as well as create a recreational trail on the railroad side of the bridge, because you would have to elevate that much, and it would interconnect with the Empire Railway Museum and hopefully some more recreational assets along the way. This project is estimated about $2.8 million. The town has also currently applied through the DEP for a local flood analysis program to do further HEC-RAS modeling to see what other moves can be made in Phoenicia in order to reduce the flooding for the entire hamlet of Phoenicia. And we will be having public meetings specifically in the hamlet of Phoenicia to discuss this further in detail with the residents there. But as of right now, we have this through the CDBG DR program, and again, hope to increase the floodplain availability for the stream. Know that right now the stream gets backwater, which creates backwater in the Stony Cove, and that's why the water runs down Main Street consistently. So our next project is the improved data collection and storage for the building department. We noticed that during Irene, especially knowing the spread of the devastation throughout Shandaken, it was very difficult for our building inspector at the time doing paper-held forms to go to all these homes and do assessments on these homes and try to get them building permits and try to address all these situations. We're also at the same time looking at what's called the community rating system. The town wants to get involved in this so that we can reduce flood rates or flood insurance rates for all the town residents. The more activities and the more points you score through the CRS, the lower your flood insurance rates should be within a certain community. By digitally upgrading the department, we will be able to monitor these much more quickly, create elevation certificates a lot easier, have these available to the building inspector in case of a time of disaster, and be able to respond to the residents much more quickly on how they can repair and restore their homes after a disaster or make them more resilient for future flooding. In the same respect, we talked about adding elevation monuments. know that we have new FEMA flood mapping that is going to be adopted probably within the next 2-year period. These maps are much more elaborate than they were in the past. Actually, there were some streams that were never mapped before. So now you're going to have a lot more people that are going to be mandated to have flood insurance if they weren't mandated to have it before. In order to keep those rates low, you need to know the elevation of your home. To get an elevation certificate, you have to have a surveyor carry that elevation from what's called a monument or a marker set throughout the community. The distance that it has to be carried increases the cost. Now, obviously, we can't afford to give everybody the money at $800 average, $600 to $800 per clip for elevation certificates. We can't afford to pay for everybody to get an elevation certificate. So as a general sense, what we said is let's try to put more elevation monuments throughout the town to cheapen the cost of having to carry that elevation throughout the neighborhoods. And that's it in a nutshell. Again, we hope to have it digitized. This is a fairly simple project we think we could accomplish within a year or two at a cost of $100,000 if it costs that, but would be beneficial for the town in the long term for resiliency as well as for emergency response activities. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Doris.
Oh, oh, okay. Well, this is what the hot button topic. This is where I get shot. Anyway, this is the municipal complex. A lot of, what happened during the process, and people had a lot of questions in terms of how do we make things available to them in case of an emergency. How do we find people? How do we get food and information, and how do we keep track of where people live? I think we did a terrific job. Rob did an incredible job, just getting information out. Our recovery people and the emergency did a terrific job, but everything is in a different place. And communications between all of the agencies was difficult, and it's my understanding that literally short of carrier pigeons, literally we were handing notes to people to get them from one place to another. And because we have a vulnerable population, we have a lot of people in need, people who don't even drive or who can't get to transportation. We have a local bus, but it's all in a lot of different places. So I came up with a schematic, and this is for a master plan. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen now, today, tomorrow, ever, but it does mean that if funds become available, we have a plan, we have a vision for what it can be. And part of the vision is to have a complex where it can be all of our town services, including services for the elderly, the handicapped, whatever services we need under one roof, emergency services. Also, it would be a hub. It, in essence, would be a place that we can have outreach, we can have, businesses come and get information. It can be a place where we can have educational programs for the town. We really don't have a place like that at all. We don't, in essence, have a large community center. And it needs to be user-friendly. We want people to use it. We want people who come in from out of town say, okay, we can head to, town hall and get the information we need. If somebody's planning to do, to invite or bring in new business, where do they go? Right now, it's all over the place. But, here they can find the town supervisor, they can find the building department, and whatever other issues related to the town would all be under somewhat one umbrella. And I think it would, facilitate, in case of an emergency, getting help to people who need help. So that's basically the community complex. And again, it's to increase capability and response time and provide a secure facility for recovery materials. I understand right now, they're in garages and they're in different places, but it's a good place to have all of the services that we need in one place. The ambulance, emergency services, dog shelter. If you look at the diagram, it shows how they would relate to each other. And, again, it's not a fait accompli. I think this is a project that if it begins to happen, will develop, again, with community input. But, I don't want anybody to feel negative about it. I think it's a good thing to keep in mind. And again, it would be a project that would be out of the floodplain, so that if we do have a crisis or emergency, we know that the town complex would not be affected. That's it. What? Patty, where are you? Patty Barrage. Right here. Right here.
So that was my introduction. I am Patty Rudge, and I was asked to bring forward that which the local fire departments have asked support for. And it's a very straightforward request. In the town of Shandaken, we have a number of different firehouses. The fire district of Phoenicia actually has Mount Tremper, Phoenicia itself, and the Shandaken-Alvin Firehouse. And as an entity, they have requested funding to help support the purchase of a generator. The Big Indian Firehouse, which is actually Big Indian Oliveria,